Welcome to the Chalkboards, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 23 of Chalk Talk, brought to you by the Painted Lines. I'm your host, Shane Half, and you can follow me on Twitter at halfandhalf_TPL. I'm joined today by the best co-host in the game. You've seen him on the Tough Cover Pod. You should be betting what he's betting. It's Mark Henry Jr. You can give him a follow on Twitter at MarkHenryJr_. Mark, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. College basketball's back. Villanova won by 1,000,000 points. So my brain's been in full basketball mode, but I'm here to talk some football. Obviously, I wasn't able to do the review show last week. I only did the preview show. That was the first Chalk Talk I've missed. So I'm happy I'm able to do the review show and chop up the Eagles game. It's a loss, but it doesn't feel like some of the other losses we've had to cover.
Yeah, for sure. And we're going to get into it. We got a great show for you guys today lined up. We're going to review every Week 9 NFL game. I'm calling out some NFL coaching frauds along the way. But before we get to that, this podcast is going out live on Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. So please comment, drop us a comment. We'd love to interact with you guys. It also goes to Apple Podcasts. So if you're listening to it later, we'd love to catch you on a live show anytime, but we appreciate you following along with us. So Mark, let's get into it. The Eagles and the Chargers. The Eagles dropped this game 24-27 on a last-minute field goal from the Chargers. Where do you want to start with this game?
I feel like you have to start with the end. It feels weird to start with the end. But it's hard to look past the fact that I think Jalen Hurts, I think our offense, I think Sirianni, I think they had their best drive of the season, maybe of Jalen Hurts' career. I'd have to really go back and dive into some of the drives against the Saints and the Cardinals last season. But they had maybe the most hopeful drive if you're counting the Jalen to Devonta connection, Jalen running around. Jalen, he looked the best on that drive as he did all game or as he has all year, and then he doesn't get the ball back. And that, that could be a little bit of a microcosm of the season. I know that obviously Jalen has not been perfect. The offense has not been perfect. There's been plenty of games where there's been reasonable complaints about the play calling or Hurts or whatever you want to complain about on offense. But you can't really do that heavily about this game. And, if our defense is able to either stop them from scoring a touchdown and stop them to a field goal, or was able to get off the field after scoring a touchdown without wasting 6.5 minutes, then we're talking about a different thing. I just wish that Jalen Hurts would have gotten a chance at the end of the game after the drive that we saw him put together to try to put together another one, because that was by far, the most impressed I've been with him all season.
One of the things I really liked in this game is, everybody's talked about the Eagles have been good on their opening script, and then they've just struggled. Well, this game, the opening script didn't work. They punted their first two possessions. After that first two possessions, you went touchdown, field goal, then a punt, and then touchdown, and then the game was over. And so you didn't have that middle of the game lull. Obviously, you start with the punts on your first two drives, and then you get the 3 and out the first drive out of the half. So I had trouble getting going this game. But once we were in a flow, the offense moved the ball well. A lot of encouraging signs that you can see from the offense from everybody not named Jalen Reagor. So all around, it's hard to walk away from this game and feel bad about anything the offense did. You would like to have, you'd like to have Hurts hit that throw to Dallas Goedert. I think it was on the first drive. I saw that. I went back and watched that one, and Goddard's running that crosser out of a verticals look. Hurts throws it more upfield. I'd be interested to know, and you'll never get a straight answer because he's going to say it's on me, but I'd be interested to know if he thought that Goddard was going to go more upfield and was trying to lead him upfield, or if it was just an inaccurate throw. We'll never know, but watching that again, that was something I wondered. Oh, you're muted.
Talking on mute. It could be a little bit of both there for sure. Obviously, he had some pressure right in his grill. So I think above all, that probably impacted the throw and maybe made it more inaccurate. But it is also one of those throws where I mean, would it have been the craziest catch of all time if Dallas Goedert made it? No. It would be.
Yeah.
It would have been a good catch. It wouldn't have been like it wasn't Odell on Sunday Night Football, which is, I mean, we'll talk about him. He's built a career on that catch. But
I've got a Giants fan that thinks Daniel Jones is the guy that I go back and forth with on Twitter sometimes, and he screenshotted that ball going off of Goddard's hand, and he put it next to Daniel Jones's one-handed catch, and he tweeted that to me during the game, and I got a good chuckle out of it.
That's funny. I didn't think it would have been that crazy of a catch. Like, it felt like a play Goddard could have made. I was a little disappointed he didn't step up and make that play. My fantasy team was as well. But yeah, I mean, I do think obviously more blame goes on Hurts for that play, and I think that was a tough situation. I didn't expect him to make that good of a throw. I remember, like, just live when I saw the duress that he was under and the situation that he was in. I didn't expect there to be someone that was that wide open, number one, and I didn't expect someone that was under that much pressure to put the ball in the ballpark to be able to make the play.
The bigger ding to me on the day for Hurts would be the missed throw to Devonta Smith in the back of the end zone. I mean, Smith, it looks on the broadcast, it looks like it was pretty well covered. Smith was open. He was wide open. And there was some pressure, but Hurts' footwork was awful. His mechanics were awful on that one, and he skipped that to him. That's a throw. More than the Goddard throw, that's a throw that I want to see him make. I mean, the Goddard throw would be icing on the cake. The Devonta Smith throw was a much easier throw than the Dallas Goedert throw was.
Agreed. I mean, that's the throw that he has to make for sure. If there's a throw to complain about in that game, it's definitely that throw for sure. But I don't want to get bogged down in complaining about Jalen Hurts, or Merrill Reese might call in and yell at us. But
I would love if Merrill Reese called in. I don't think he would yell at us though. I mean, I said immediately after the game on the post-game show, I gave Hurts a B+ rating for the game. I thought, you could ticky-tack one or two throws there, but overall, I thought he played a really good game. It's the most encouraged I've been by Hurts in a game this season, and that includes the Atlanta game where he played really well, but he wasn't asked to do anything. I felt like he was actually asked to do things, and I tweeted out his passing chart after the game, and we actually threw the ball to the left side of the field more than the right today. So still avoiding the middle, but he was working both sidelines, which was good to see.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've said this so many times, but that next week's game against Denver, if you can win that game and if Jalen can have another nice performance, whether that be in a game manager role or throwing, 17 to 20 times, or whether that be having to open it up and throw it more, that's going to be a big test for Jalen Hurts, in my opinion. And right now, I mean, it's hard not to feel optimistic a little bit after that game. I feel like going into the last 2 weeks before the Lions game and before this game, I was definitely at the point where he probably wasn't going to be the starting quarterback next year. And then now I'm kind of back to that 50-50, maybe a little bit more 60-40 that he still won't be. But I guess where would you put the percentage at that Jalen Hurts is the starting quarterback without a rookie first-round pick behind him or anything like that? What would you put the likelihood that he's like the guy going into next year?
I still think it's like 15 to 20% chance. I think it's very low. Now, if he starts to string together games like this, and the Eagles are not going to be able to run the ball like they have the last 2 weeks. I mean, they've literally played two of the worst run defenses in the NFL. So when he has to do more, if he's able to do more.
Denver's not very good either, though.
Yeah, and Von Miller's gone now too, which hurts. But, they're not going to be able to ask Hurts to throw the ball 15, 17 times a game the rest of the season. I like that Sirianni is adjusting the way that he needs to. I want to see the offense a little more balanced with this same style of some of the under center stuff and the play action. If Hurts can have that same efficiency throwing 24, 25 times a game, then I'm ready to have a discussion about it. I want to see the growth. I'm encouraged by what I saw, but I still think it's a fairly low chance he'll be the starter next year. But I would love to be wrong.
Me too. Yeah. Maybe I'll probably put it 30%, maybe 35%. But yeah, I would love to be wrong as well, because I mean, and Merrill Reese, I mean, I mentioned that in passing, but all the stuff he said to ESP on that call about Jalen Hurts' personality and off the field stuff and his leadership traits and all that stuff does really want to make you root for the guy. And plays like I can't believe it took me this long to bring this up, but on that last drive, plays like the play where he just flips like an absolute insane person. Just that's competitive. That's what you want out of your quarterback, and that's what you want out of a leader on your team. And that was awesome to see. And that was one of those plays where it's like, that's our guy. You know what I mean? That was a nice
I tweeted
moment.
that clip and I said I couldn't even do that on a trampoline.
That was crazy, man.
It was that same drive too. He has, or it might be the same play. Is it the same play that Bosa came free off the edge, or was that a different play?
I think that was no. I don't think it was the same play, but I think it was the same drive. And just I think this might have happened on that play, or maybe it was another run on this drive. His ability to get like 3 more yards than you think he's gonna get when he's like he does this little like side. It's gonna get him probably popped in a game soon where he'll get hit pretty hard on this, but. He does this little thing where you think he's going to go out of bounds, say at like the 35, and then he'll like tiptoe to the 38. And whether that be past the first down or getting it closer to the first down, he always has this knack when he's running out of bounds to the sidelines, getting like 3-4 more yards than you expect him to get in that situation.
Eventually that guy's going to come in to pop him and he's going to read it and just step out of bounds and get 15 more.
That's true. Yeah, that's absolutely true.
I tweeted out the play. It was a cover 0 blitz, and Bosa comes unblocked off the right side, and I tweeted that play out, just talking about how it was the second time that Bosa was untouched, and he made him miss, and he picks up yardage. And a guy was saying, he should have taken that check down to the flat to his running back. He was open. I was like, yeah, but it's cover 0. What do you trust? Do you trust Jalen Hurts to make Joey Bosa miss with nobody behind him? Or do you trust your running back to make a safety miss with nobody behind him? If I'm Hurts, I'm keeping that all the way because I'm pretty sure I can make Bosa miss. But, I thought it was good. I thought he played really good, especially that last drive. It's the most impressive drive of his NFL career.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. That's what I kept saying. And it sucked that he didn't get a chance. It truly did feel like one of those games where we just didn't have enough time on the clock. We just didn't have – we ran out of time. And it's a shame, but – it's hard to look anywhere but Jonathan Gannon and that defense.
Yeah. So we've got all our positivity out of the way. Now let's talk about the defense. The defense was just horrific in this game. The Eagles' defense generated 2 pressures on 38 dropbacks against a team whose right tackle gave up 10 pressures the week before. Man, Justin Herbert struggled against the Ravens' blitz-happy defense 3 weeks ago. They have the bye. They come out against the Patriots. The Patriots throw all these multiple looks at him, those amoeba fronts. Herbert really struggled against that. So what does Jonathan Gannon think is a great plan? Let's just sit back and play the same soft coverage that has gotten us gashed all season. And, hey, it worked. Same results we've had the entire season. Don't get me wrong, Justin Herbert's an unbelievable quarterback. I think he's one of the better young quarterbacks in the league. But I just don't see how that can be your game plan coming into this game. It's just baffling to me.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I'll get to that. But if this stat's true, I have no way of I don't doubt it at all. That's a crazy stat. Hurts 6 rushing first down Sunday. Give him 35. 4th most in the league behind Jonathan Taylor at 49, Derrick Henry at 49, Lamar Jackson at 36. That's really impressive. I don't even know where you I'm sure there's a Football Reference page for that, and I'm sure there's ways to look that up. But that's a really impressive stat.
Yeah, Joe, if you know where that stat came from, if you dropped that, I'd like to add it to my stat database I go look stuff up in because I haven't seen that before. But that's an interesting stat.
That's interesting. Yeah, thanks, Joe.
So our defense, I tweeted this out. On the year, our defense is allowing a 75% completion percentage for 2,121 yards, 16 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions, which is a QB rating of 103.1. If you looked at those quarterbacks, okay, as one player, just whoever's played the Eagles, that player would be 1st in completion percentage, 11th in touchdowns, and 3rd in QB rating. Meanwhile, we blitz or we play man coverage at one of the lowest rates in the league. Our defensive personnel is not great, but our scheme is horrific. And I've said it for a couple of weeks now. Jonathan Gannon should be out of a job. They should fire him immediately. Get somebody. I don't even care. Let Howie call the defense. He can't be any worse.
Yeah, I'm right with you, and I actually gave you a shout out on the Philly Sports Podcast. I do Everything's Fine. I'll have to send you the clip from it where I showed that tweet. I showed that exact tweet you just put up on the screen, and I plugged Chalk Talk. So I'll plug what I was talking about on that pod and what my co-host Kyle said. If we go to Denver, and if Teddy Bridgewater replicates the success he had against Dallas against us next week, or if he replicates the type of success that Herbert, Carr, and some of these other quarterbacks have had against us, leave him in Denver. Like he cannot. That's truly the make or break game in my opinion for Gannon. I don't want them to be able to use him as their excuse for the next 6-7 weeks after that Denver game. I want them to try to fix it. If we lose to Denver, if the defense doesn't perform well, get rid of Gannon and get, like you said, get anyone in there. Get someone else in there, someone of experience, someone who's been at DC before, someone who's done this before, preferably. And I mean, that's just, we clearly dropped the ball, not getting a coordinator on one side of the ball that was experienced and that had done it before. And offensive coordinator, I mean, I understand it. Sirianni's a head coach. He was hired from being an OC. He's obviously going to, look for OCs and guys like that are young and that have been under him before. And I get not going in and getting Mike McCoy or getting an OC that's been a head coach or an OC before. There was no excuse for hiring Jonathan Gannon instead of hiring a legitimate defensive coordinator who had experience in the role. And I think that's showing, and it's showing in spades when, even if you I can't believe it took me this long to mention this, that 16-yard run to Austin Eckler at the end of the game I don't have the exact number of what, it took it from this yard field goal to this yard field goal. Maybe it might've been like a 45-yard field goal to a 29-yard field goal. That's a pretty big difference for a kicker who was just cut 2 weeks ago. And the kicker that missed a kick earlier on in the game. That was gutless. That was a gutless effort by the defense. And whether you want to blame that on the guys on the defense being tired or being disinterested, or if you want to blame that on Jonathan Gannon and having them not ready, everyone in the stadium knew they were running the ball. They were getting ready and they were putting it in the middle of the field for their kicker. And we still let them get 16 yards. It was a run up the middle. It's Austin Eckler. It's not Derrick Henry we're talking about running up the gut. It's Austin Eckler. It's a guy who bounces around the tackles. He's not running between the tackles like he's John Riggins. Like that was infuriating to let that 16-yard run up in that situation. And that alone was more of an indictment on Gannon than anything I've seen this season, in my opinion.
I mean, leave Gannon in Denver and just hand Brandon Graham the headset. I mean, can't be worse. So here's one I wanted to float out here, and I don't believe this at all, but it'd be funny if it was true. So I saw a lot of people ripping Derek Barnett for jumping off sides on that 3rd and 6, made it a 3rd and 1. I think they QB sneaked it for the first down or whatever it was. I said, maybe this was just a big brain play by Derek Barnett. He knew there's no chance that we can stop them if they drop back and pass on 3rd and 6. I'm going to jump off sides and make it 3rd and 1, and hopefully we can stop the run. Don't believe it at all. But now Derek Barnett, he has 4 offsides penalties this year versus 1 sack. He's got 1 sack in his last 12 games. So Derek Barnett, so glad we're paying him $10.1 million this year. But this leads into one of my points I wanted to talk about. So I said before, teased at the start of the podcast, I wanted to call out some NFL head coaches that are vastly overrated. And I've got 3 of them on the docket, and one of them is right here. Brandon Staley. Brandon Staley is so overrated. Okay. So he talks about analytics and he's aggressive on 4th downs. They went for it on 4 4th downs in this game. All the right call, which is great. But you look at what they do on early downs. This guy is hamstringing Justin Herbert, and it's ridiculous. Everything is these shallow depth of target throws when Herbert can throw the ball downfield. But the damning stat from this game, the LA Chargers had 21 early down rushes with an EPA of negative 0.25 yards per play. They had 31 early down passes with an EPA of plus 0.64. So literally, They lost 3 points every time they had 4 early down running calls, and they continued to run the ball against a team that was stopping it and could not stop the run. So he goes for it on 4th downs. Yay, analytics. This guy is killing the track. He makes Justin Herbert be superhuman on 3rd downs, and he's done it all year. All year, they live and die if Justin Herbert can convert 3rd downs, because they get nothing out of 1st and 2nd down. Staley, he might be a good defensive coach. He might not. I mean, they've got the worst run defense in the league, but his handling of in-game situations is egregious, and I think he is one of the most overrated coaches in the NFL.
I think it's just too early for me to have a concrete opinion yet. Maybe you could argue he's still learning on the job, but I do think he's getting a lot of credit in analytics circles just for going in for it on 4th down and just for saying the right thing a lot of the times in interviews. I think he's really smart PR-wise.
He sounds really good in interviews.
Yeah.
Sure. I like him. I love listening to him talk, but yeah.
I think he speaks to guys like us. I think he speaks to nerds like us pretty well. And that's what most of the media are. So they just eat it up. And I totally understand that. Now, I do think that there's probably something to the fact that, is he that good at his job, or was Anthony Lynn that bad at his job? Maybe it's one of those. So maybe it's like I was going to make a joke from a TV show, but it seems inappropriate. So I'm gonna leave it off. But it's one of those situations where you're, I'm trying to think of the analogy that won't get me in trouble. Your ex-girlfriend was really ugly, and there's a new girl who's, she's not that hot, but she's way better than your ex. So, she's really hot in comparison. That's something that's relating to a TV show, but I don't want to, But
the psychological term you're looking for there is anchoring.
Yeah, exactly.
But we're not a psychology podcast.
Yeah, I was trying to relate it in. Whatever. I don't want to get canceled. But I do think that there's something to the fact that they had the worst head coach I've ever seen in terms of situational awareness and situational management and late game situations, what to do with the clock and play calling and timeouts and everything of the like. So Brandon Staley's probably an average coach, maybe below average coach, but he took over a pretty good situation with a franchise quarterback, with pieces at running back with Eckler, receivers at Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, pretty good O-line. You have Derwin James, Joey Bosa. You have pillars of that team that are ready to compete. And all you needed was a semi-competent coach to get to the level that they're currently at. So you could argue that if a legitimately good coach stepped in there, or a really good coach that you trust stepped in there, that maybe this team would be like 8-1 instead of, I believe they're 6-3, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We got Job says Justin Herbert is the 5th quarterback to complete 80+% of his passes against the Eagles this season. In the last 70 years, the Eagles allowed 6 quarterbacks to complete 80+% of their throws. And I had seen that stat before. He said it's from Tim McManus. That's just absurd. Matthew Walsh says the most overrated NFL coach, in my opinion, is Mike Zimmer. He went on to say Matt Nagy is overrated too, which I don't believe to be possible. At least if you listen to us, there is nobody overrating Matt Nagy here. I said he should be bagging groceries, but
I've overrated him at times, but it's mainly just because it's like he's got the craziest record ever. If you look at Matt Nagy's record, it's just like, how is this the case? And honestly, we'll get to it, but the Bears should be 4-5 right now and not 3-6, and that's partially his fault, but I think it had more to do with officiating than anything else. Mike Zimmer, I can get behind, though. I don't think Mike Zimmer is a good head coach at all, and I do think that there's a lot of people out there that cape for him.
Yeah. My last note from this game, I don't know if you saw it. Did you see after the game when Sirianni was walking off the field? Did you see that whole video?
Yeah.
And threw the bouquet of flowers. It was a nice bouquet of flowers, too. My only thought is that Nick Sirianni reacts very differently to flowers than my wife does. And I'll just leave it there. But you got anything else you want to point out about this one before we kick it around the NFL?
I'm sure if I thought hard about it, I could find some things to complain about, but
I'm not sure if you froze or you're being really still.
I think
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, I don't
You're
know.
back.
I think okay, cool. My bad. I just wanted to say before we moved on to the rest of the NFL, Devonta Smith probably his best game as a pro.
Absolutely.
So that was definitely encouraging. He had some weeks where it didn't feel like he was as important of a part of the of the game plan. So it was good to see him really get involved and make that play, especially at the end of the game, our last offensive play.
Job says, hopefully you don't throw the flowers at her. I've never done that. Maybe I'll have to try that, and we'll call it a scientific experiment for Chalk Talk. I'll let you guys know. Okay, let's kick it around the NFL. We go to the Thursday night game. The Indianapolis Colts top the New York Jets 45-30, which, wow. The biggest takeaway for me in this game is that the Jets traded for Joe Flacco to cover a 3-week injury to their starting quarterback in a season that they're awful. And then when their backup, or they didn't even make him the backup. And then when the backup got hurt, Flacco wasn't even the third string. So they literally traded a pick for a fourth string quarterback. It makes no sense to me. The other takeaway I have from this game is the Colts defense just gave up 30 points and 486 yards to a 35-year-old third string quarterback. This defense is bad. Moving forward, I think the big question for the Jets has to be, are you starting Mike White? Or are you starting Zach Wilson? Zach Wilson's the guy you took at number 2 overall. Mike White's the fan favorite now, and he was hot 2 weeks ago before he left with injury. Obviously Wilson needs to be your guy, but that might be a hard thing to go back to, especially as you saw the team rally behind Mike White.
Yeah, I have nothing really else to add on the Jets there. I agree with everything you said, though. It's a tough situation. I think Zach Wilson stinks. Dating back to his days at BYU, I was never in on him. But obviously, if you take him second, I think it would take a whole heck of a lot more from Mike White to make them move off of that. Maybe if they fire Joe Douglas like they rightfully should, maybe someone else making the decisions would have a different directive. But I think that they'll get Zach Wilson back in there once he's ready to play. But the thing I want to focus on here is the Colts. The Colts scored 30-plus points in the last 4 weeks. You wouldn't think that if you've watched the games or if you've listened to Wentz reaction on Twitter. But the offense is actually humming a little bit better than we would have expected earlier on this season. Frank Reich seemingly has them going in the right direction. They've played some easy opponents, but they played the Jaguars coming up too. So I think that, you can get some pretty early lines and some pretty early reads on their game against the Jags. I already took them -10 and their team total over 28.5 for next week. I think their offense keeps on rolling.
Yeah, and we're getting closer and closer to that pick converting to that first rounder in the Carson Wentz deal. So something else to keep an eye on. And that's the furthest thing from their mind, because they had Carson Wentz in to kneel the ball at the end of the game. That'd be a no-brainer to stick the backup in to kneel the ball in a 2-score game. But they're not worried. They're not concerned about that at all.
Yeah, it's shocking that they're just not thinking about that at all. It seems like a really easy thing. They just played the Jets. There was, I think that was there was a couple weeks before that they won a game 31-3. I can't remember if that was the Texans or a team like that. They just haven't thought about it at all, it seems. So I think I saw somewhere that we only need 3 more weeks, right?
Yeah, it's projected week 13. I think it was midway through the week 13 game is when it's projected to hit. So,
wow.
So yeah, fingers crossed. And then they need to lose every game afterwards. So let's move on to Cleveland at Cincinnati. Cleveland wins this in blowout fashion, 41-16. Baker Mayfield has a perfect QB rating, and the Browns are the first team since 2012 with 3 60-plus yard touchdowns in one game. And all they had to do to pull that off was trade the most talented receiver the most talented receiver on their roster. What'd you take away from this game?
Yeah, I think this was obvious. And I think we talked about it on the show, on the preview. I loved the Browns in this game, and I thought that it was just such an obvious bounce back spot. And it was such an obvious spot for the Browns to really galvanize behind Baker and galvanize behind, their head coach and the situation. And I think this kind of goes to prove everything we've always said about Baker, which is whether you want to question his, ability on the field and is he a franchise quarterback? That's actually something I want to ask you after I get done here. Whether he's a franchise quarterback or not, how, is he a top 10, top 15 guy? Does Odell have any, is he right at all in any of the things he's talking about? Or should I say Odell Sr.? But he's a leader, and that team rallied behind him, and that team backed him up. And I said it, some NFL reporter the week of going into the game was saying that everyone that she talked to in the locker room anonymously was telling her that we are on Baker's side here. There's no Team Odell, Team Baker situation. And it seemed like it. It seemed like they were fully behind Baker as their leader, as their quarterback, as their guy, and as the face of the franchise. So whether or not he is that remains to be seen, I think. But the guys in that locker room believe that he is, and you can tell why when you listen to him talk. And I know you're obviously an Oklahoma guy, but what do you think about that? And secondarily, do you think he is a franchise quarterback? What you would define in that term?
So here's where I'm at with Baker. From a analytical standpoint, from a spreadsheet standpoint, I am not paying Baker Mayfield a long-term mega deal. Like if he's willing to get into that like bottom of, like top 8 quarterback money, I'm willing to do that. I'm not willing to go break the bank for Baker from a purely financial standpoint and cap allocation standpoint. But I'm a nerd on a computer, and there's an emotional aspect of it as well. And for the exact reason you talked about, that he's such a leader, the team galvanizes behind him. I'm afraid that if you don't pay him, if you cut him loose and you say we're going to replace him, that all goes off the rails and it all goes bad. So purely from a football finances, removing the emotions of the people aside, I would not pay Baker. But I'm not sure that you really have a choice if you're the Browns.
And you also might not have a choice because think about your history and think about the last 20, 30 years. You haven't had a quarterback as good as even he is. And you've been cycling in and out and in and out and in and out. And you have this guy, maybe he's not the best. Maybe he's not good enough to receive the money he's getting. But the team rallies behind him. The city seems to rally behind him. I think the fans love him there. And why would you not if you're a Cleveland fan? And this is really the first era of, it's not like it's some dynasty era of football in Cleveland, but they made the playoffs last year for the first time in a long time. They won a playoff game for the first time in a long time. They're over 500. They just, won a big game against Cincinnati, one of their rivals. So all these things, if you're a Browns fan, are first. You haven't seen these types of things in years. And like you said, I agree with you. I would have all the trepidation in the world about paying Baker Mayfield a legitimate franchise quarterback salary. But if you're the Browns with your history and you're the city of Cleveland with your history and the Browns come out and say, hey guys, I know maybe they make the playoffs this year. Who knows? The AFC is going to be difficult. They're going to compete for a wild card, I'm sure, maybe compete for that division even. But I find it hard to believe that Cleveland's going to come out and say, hey fans, that guy that's in all the commercials, that guy that you've bought all the jerseys for, that guy that took us to the first playoffs and maybe took us to back-to-back playoffs. We don't think he's worth the contract. So we're going to go draft a new guy and try to restart this thing all over again. I just don't see it. And I know that the guy that drafted him is not there anymore. So maybe that does change a little bit of the narrative, and who knows what happens for the rest of the year. But the Browns are one of the most interesting teams in the league to me right now. So maybe I'm spending a little bit too much time talking about the Browns, but I will say their game next week is the game of the week. Browns at Patriots. I really think those teams are kind of right outside, in my opinion, that like contender level in the AFC. And I think the winner of that game, you could make an argument is a contender. That's what I'm willing to say about that Browns Patriots game.
It's interesting to me to look at the AFC North and just say, who do you trust in that division? Like Baltimore has a great quarterback and a coach. Their secondary is awful, and their run game is beat up. Pittsburgh has a great defense. They have no offense. Cincinnati has weapons, but they've got no offensive line. Cleveland has the dominant running game and a good secondary. Their quarterback is questionable. And it really seems like this division, they're just set up perfectly to like beat each other up. Like Baltimore and Pittsburgh, or Pittsburgh is going to always beat Cincinnati because of their pass rush, and Cincinnati's got no O-line. Cincinnati is going to beat Baltimore because they can exploit Baltimore not having a secondary. Like it's just this cycle where I feel like they're just going to beat each other up, and then two of them are going to make the playoffs, and they're both going to have a shot to make a run unless they meet each other.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'd still lean Baltimore and Cleveland as the two best teams in that division, and I think I'd still give Baltimore the firm edge as the best team in that division, and I think they'll win the division. And it's just the Steelers are going to be 6-3 after they beat the Lions this upcoming week, and they're one of the worst 6-3 teams of all time if that's the case.
Yeah. All right, let's move it along here. We've got a lot of ground to make up. Let's go to one of my favorite games of the week, Denver at Dallas. Denver wins 30-16. Dallas was down 30-0 with 5 minutes left. Let me put this in context. This is a fun stat I found somewhere when I was looking at stuff. Dallas was a double-digit favorite down by 30 points. That's the first time that's happened since 2001. That 2001 game where it happened, the New England Patriots were a double-digit underdog, and they led Indianapolis by 30-plus points. You know who made their first start of their career in that game? Tom Brady.
I can. Yeah.
Yeah. So the GOAT, the greatest quarterback of all time, making his first start, and us just not knowing he was that good was the last time a game that was this big of a spread happened like this. And so they're down 30-0 with 5 minutes left, and Dak is still in there. And yeah, they score 2 touchdowns, get 2 2-point conversions. Like, congrats, you only lost by 14 now. I don't understand why Dak was still in this game. He's coming off of a calf injury. I don't understand why teams aren't smarter about load management in those situations.
Yeah, I clearly think that. I mean, yeah, we said that before. We said this should be a Cooper Rush game, and there's a comment here from Ty Book. Yeah, that's definitely true. Bridgewater's definitely.
I clicked the wrong one. If Dallas lost to Denver, what happens to the Birds against Denver? Bridgewater 76 completion percentage is a safe bet. Yeah, I don't want to. We'll talk about that on the preview show. I'm not ready emotionally yet.
I will just say every week is different in the NFL, and I think last week is an example of that more than anything. I don't necessarily think Denver beating Dallas means that we can't beat Denver, and neither does Vegas, because we're a 2.5-point underdog in Denver, which means they think we're a better team on a neutral field than Denver. So that's, I think it's a 50-50 game against Denver. And just like I thought it was a 50-50 game against the Chargers, and we lost on a field goal at the end of the game as time expired. But I would say that this was just a situational loss for Dallas. This isn't any loss that I'd be freaking out and I'd be saying, I even saw someone saying, like, can the Giants come back and win the division from the Cowboys? And I was like,
no.
What are we smoking here? Like, I thought that was insane to me. Dallas is going to win the division. Now, I was on this pod also saying, when people were getting really, really, extreme on the Cowboys, in my opinion, saying they were going to the Super Bowl and saying they were Super Bowl contenders, I was also saying I did think they were a step behind that Rams, Packers, Cardinals, I think I'm Buccaneers tier in the NFC of contenders. And I still do believe that. And I think that this game was kind of a snapback to reality, that they do still have some holes on that team, and maybe Denver was able to exploit some of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about the Giants. Somebody's saying maybe the Giants can come back. A fun Giants stat is at 3-6 right now. The Giants have the best start of a season they've had since 2016. So I can get why Giants fans are pretty excited right now and amped up.
Yeah, this is the most success they've had in quite some time.
Yeah. All right, let's move it along. Houston at Miami. Miami wins 17-9. Miami had 5 turnovers in this game, but they still won because Houston is somehow even worse. Tyrod was not the savior for Houston. He threw 3 picks, and I really don't have anything worth mentioning about this game. A pretty unwatchable game.
Did Tyrod cost himself money like as a potential stopgap quarterback next year with this game, because like everyone was betting on the Texans in this game. Everyone had the Texans across the board with Tyrod coming back, and Tyrod could not have looked worse. I mean, that was just a brutal performance from Tyrod Taylor, and they still had a chance to cover, like you said, because of those 5 turnovers, but they couldn't quite push it across the line, and they couldn't win the game either for our draft pick. So yeah, it sucks that Miami's going to end up winning like 5 games, I feel like.
Yeah. Oh, well. We'll still have a high first rounder from him.
For sure.
Just not as high as we hoped initially. Yeah. Okay, Atlanta at New Orleans. Atlanta comes out on top with a 27-25 victory. The Saints rallied from being down 24-6. They took a brief lead, and then they lost on a field goal. My number one takeaway from this game is the Saints wide receivers are just atrocious. Philadelphia's had a lot of bad receiver rooms over the years. None of them even come close to touching this Saints wide receiver room.
Yeah, I mean, the Falcons really tried to falcon that game away. They really tried to. Like, that was crazy. That was one of the most, like, there's a game every couple of weeks where you're watching Red Zone or you're watching another game and you're watching a bunch of games at the same time. I was at Park Sportsbook, so I had every game on every TV going on. And I had Falcons team total over 16.5 in that game. So that cashed in the third quarter. So once that happened and they were up big, I kind of just like stopped paying attention. I looked back and the Saints are driving to take a lead. And I'm like, what is going on right now? How did this become a game? So I looked into like the box score and I looked into the game and I'm like, oh my God. Like I could not believe that the Falcons had given up the lead, which is insane. Even, like, I should never be surprised about the Atlanta Falcons giving up a lead. That's, basically their MO as a franchise. But at least they were able to get down the field at the end of the game and make a play. I think it was Cordero Patterson that made a big play to help them get down the field. And they won the game. And somehow the Atlanta Falcons are currently 500 and sitting in the 7th playoff spot in the NFC. And this is a tough situation for me. I think I said this on the pod before. I guaranteed on Twitter, I think it was 2 years ago, that Matt Ryan would never quarterback a team with a winning record again. So I'm a bit nervous that the Falcons are going to get to 9-8.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to watch it play out. He's not. I don't know. The Falcons, they've been better this year than I thought they would be, and definitely better than I thought they would be after their Week 1 performance.
Oh, they seem like night and day from that team, even with their late game shenanigans.
Yeah. Okay. The Las Vegas Raiders traveled to the Meadowlands and lost to the New York Giants 23-16. I love this stat, so I'm going to say it again. The Giants are now 3-6, which is the best start they've had to a season since 2016. All joking and ribbing the Giants aside, though, their defense has allowed 17 or less points in 3 straight games, 2 of which were against the Raiders and the Chiefs. And so maybe their defense is starting to hit a little bit of a stride here.
Yeah, Patrick Graham, defensive coordinator for them. I think he's going to get some head coach looks this offseason. I think that's going to be a guy that teams potentially try to interview and potentially try to poach away from the Giants to be a head coach. I think he's one of the best defensive coordinators out there right now. And I think the Giants have a top 10 defense. It really, if you break down the numbers, especially as of late, like you just said. So that is concerning. I don't want the Giants to win any game. So I hope that offense being as bad as I still think it is, the fact that you got as many turnovers, as many gifts from the Raiders. I think the Raiders missed 2 field goals in this game. Derek Carr he threw a pick 6. He fumbled the ball trying to drive to win or tie the game at the end of the game. So it really felt like this was a game that was handed to the Giants by the Raiders and Derek Carr. And the Giants offense was like barely willing to accept it and barely willing to take the game. I'm still not impressed by Daniel Jones. I'm still not impressed by this Giants offense. I don't care what anyone says. I don't care what the wins about more winning. It's just this is not a good offense. And if they were a good offense, they would have taken the gifts that their defense gave them and actually scored touchdowns instead of scoring 23 points on a situation where they got as many gifts as they did. That game, I'm rambling, but that game was crazy to me. I didn't have a bet in that game, but it's funny. even though I didn't have a bet on it, I was focusing on it as hard as any game on the board, just hoping that the Giants could figure out a way to lose. But that was the worst game Derek Carr's played all season.
Yeah. And you kind of had to wonder if it was coming. They were on a hot streak, but all the stuff that's gone down, and then they had a bye to sit there and think about it. So, I mean, we talked about it being a potential letdown spot on the preview pod, and it certainly proved to be that.
Yeah, absolutely. And isn't it? I'm stealing a bit from Everything's Fine, the other podcast I'm on, but isn't it a shame that the Raiders didn't let down like a week before they started letting down?
Yeah, no kidding. It'd be nice.
Of course.
Okay. Moving on. New England at Carolina. New England wins 24-6. The Sam Darnold trade, as baffling as it was at the time, is just indefensible now. And then to go ahead and pick up his fifth-year option before he even plays a snap. Now they're on the hook for $18.8 million next year for this guy, a guy that they don't even want to start now. He's got 10 interceptions in his last 6 games, truly playing dreadful football. And again, I apologize to Adam Gase.
So what's the title of this episode again, Shane?
It is... I don't remember. NFL coaching frauds. Yeah.
So let's talk about Matt Rule.
Okay.
I'm a big college football fan. And Matt Rule, there's always seemingly one college football coach that gets rumored for a job every offseason that I just don't understand. This year it was Urban Meyer. I never understood that connection. Last year it was Matt Rule. I know that he built Temple up. I know that what he did at Baylor was admirable. I never watched Matt Rule coach in college and thought, wow, this is an advanced thinker of football, and this is an NFL coach. I never had that thought. Just like Pat Fitzgerald from Northwestern, he gets brought up for jobs every once in a while. Matt Campbell from Iowa State, he gets brought up for jobs in the NFL every once in a while. I've never understood any of those guys being brought up for jobs. I'm not a Matt Rule guy. I think he's another guy kind of similar to Brandon Staley. He's figured out the PR of this all. He's figured out how to coach speak to the media to get them to like him and get them to think he's smart. I don't think Matt Rule is anything special. And I already have some Penn State fan friends they've decided that they want to keep James Franklin one more year just so they can wait for Matt Rule to get fired from Carolina and bring him back into Penn State because they think he's a good college football coach. But I've never gotten the Matt Rule thing personally.
Yeah, you've been outspoken against Matt Rule for quite a while, and we're definitely seeing that play out in Carolina right now.
I think anything positive that people took away from that year with Teddy Bridgewater as the quarterback and not having Christian McCaffrey all year, I think all of that credit should go to Joe Brady. And I'm seeing stuff like Matt Rule and Joe Brady have had disagreements, and Matt Rule might take play calling duties away from Joe Brady. Matt Rule, you're lucky Joe Brady doesn't have your job. Joe Brady is a much more qualified head coaching option than you are. And in my opinion, Joe Brady's leaving to take the LSU head coaching job this offseason. And I think that's what he should do.
Yeah. Okay, let's move along to Buffalo at Jacksonville. RIP anyone that was still in a survivor pool. As the Jags win, what was it, 9-6? I didn't jot this score down, but
yeah, 9-6.
The Bills' defense played phenomenally in this game. They were given 4 short fields and they gave up 9 points. Josh Allen's a gambler. You need a defense like this for when Josh Allen is off. But, you saw the funny thing going around Twitter that in this game, Josh Allen sacked Josh Allen, he intercepted Josh Allen, and he recovered a Josh Allen fumble. And so it was a coming out party for a Josh Allen, just not the one that we might have expected. My other fun stat from this game is this is the first time the Jacksonville Jaguars have made a field goal on American soil this season.
That's funny. And he still missed. I think that he had the rare miss a kick, but there was a false start, so they had to move it back 5 yards. Missed another kick, but I think there was an offsides, and they had to move it back again move it front 5 yards. And then he missed again. He missed like 3 straight attempts, like all in one, and like only one counted. But that was unbelievable. I don't know if I've ever seen that before. And then on top of that, who would have thought that Josh Allen would be the Josh Allen that stood out in this matchup of Josh Allens? I mean, I had to get that joke out there. But Josh Allen from Jacksonville is one of my favorite draft prospects of all time. As Shane knows, I can fall in love with a pass rusher. I already have with George Karlaftis from Purdue. He's going to go top 10, top 15. I did hard with Gregory Rousseau last year, and he's looked pretty damn good in the NFL so far. And Josh Allen is like the all-time favorite of mine as an edge rusher in the draft. I proclaimed on draft night that I thought Josh Allen was a Hall of Fame player. I thought he was going to be a gold jacket player, and that the Giants were morons for passing up on Josh Allen for Daniel Jones. I still think that. I still think Josh Allen would have been a much better pick than Daniel Jones. But Josh Allen had been a little disappointing so far, and obviously it's hard to really judge him. He's on Jacksonville, and who knows what the scheme is there, and who knows what kind of help he has, and if he's being double teamed, and who knows really. But it was nice to see him in the news a little bit. It was nice for me as a big Josh Allen guy. He's not going to get a lot of shine very often. It was nice to see him get like a week of being a hot button topic on every podcast and every tweet and all the jokes, all the memes and all that stuff like that. It was cool to see Josh Allen. People forget, and it's funny because all the jokes are like, oh, he had a sack, an interception, a forced fumble, and it reminds me so much of when he was at Kentucky, and he used to do this kind of stuff all the time. Like he used to have a sack, a forced fumble, a recovered fumble, a pick. Like he had a game against Penn State, a bowl game, where he had a blocked punt, a sack, and a forced fumble on like 3 different plays. And I think he can be a special player. Hopefully Jacksonville turns it around, or he is able to escape Jacksonville.
Yeah. All right, let's move it along. We got 5 games left. I've got 1.5 goats left to name here, and I think we're going to fight about one of them. So Minnesota at Baltimore. Baltimore comes out with a 34-31 win. The narrative around Lamar Jackson used to be that he couldn't lead comebacks. The Ravens had to jump on people early. They had to pound the rock. They couldn't play from behind. He is disproving that this season. He overcomes a 14-point deficit this week, throws 3 touchdowns. He rushed for over 100 yards. He's the first quarterback this season to win 3 games where he trailed by double digits. Coming into this year, he was 0-6 in those opportunities. Now, the Ravens are stumbling out of the gate in these games. They've only got 1 touchdown in the first quarter of the last 6 games. They've got to figure out a way to get rolling earlier. But you can never feel safe with any lead against Baltimore as long as Lamar Jackson's on the field.
You can never feel safe with any lead against Baltimore as long as Lamar Jackson's on the field. And also, you can never feel safe with any lead, no matter what, no matter how big it is, no matter how much time is left, if you're a Minnesota Vikings fan and if you're the Minnesota Vikings, because this is week in, week out. I mean, I don't know how many times we need to see the Vikings get a big lead, blow it, and then who knows what happens from there. Sometimes they win it. Sometimes they kick a game winner. And then sometimes what happens against Baltimore is what happens. And it's funny, people will forget Lamar throws an interception in overtime. So they not only did Minnesota get the chance to fix this in overtime, they got a second chance. And it's just crazy to me that they weren't able to pull this win out.
Yeah, I love Lamar, man.
Me too.
We've talked about Lamar a lot. I'm glad to see the narratives around him finally dying and people just appreciate the quarterback that he is.
We'll see. I think the
until he loses a playoff game, and then they'll all be back. But
which he will, because that team's not good enough. He's not winning a Super Bowl. He's not going to the Super Bowl with that roster, especially with the health status of that roster. So, and the moment that happens, people will be waiting to dunk on him like it's his fault and his fault singularly, which is so stupid, and it's such a flaw of sports watching.
It's going to happen, and he's going to look bad when it happens, because the only way this team is competitive is when he just plays at an MVP level, and you can't do that every single week. And so the week that it doesn't happen is going to be the week they lose, and he's going to look really bad doing it. And so people are going to dunk on that. But hopefully it doesn't happen for a while, because I'm enjoying the narratives around Lamar now a lot more than at any other point in his career.
I totally agree. And on a much smaller scale, I want to compare it to Jalen Hurts a little bit. I think we can see, and you can see this with some games early in Kyler's career at Arizona, which I'm sure you could speak to as an Oklahoma guy. I think that these young young running quarterbacks, and not that Lamar's a young one, but running quarterbacks in general, when they have a bad game, it appears a lot uglier than it appears for, a bad game for some of the better and more polished, like a bad game for Justin Herbert, or a bad game for, I'm trying to think of Tom Brady's an easy example, but Aaron Rodgers or whoever you want to use like that. When a team is able to contain against Lamar and contain against Kyler and contain against Jalen Hurts, their flaws become really evident and just become really obvious to the average football fan in a way that I don't think that exactly happens for a guy like Justin Herbert or for, a pocket passer. And I think that that's just a flaw in how people watch sports and in how people evaluate running quarterbacks, because those guys also give you chances in games that those other guys wouldn't give you because of the kind of stuff you saw from Jalen Hurts on that drive at the end of the game, jumping over the line and getting first downs, rushing the ball. And just like that stat that Joe posted earlier about Jalen Hurts, it also applies to Lamar Jackson because he's in here. Lamar Jackson is third on the list of the most rushing first downs, which, think about that. I mean, it's just insane. I mean, all the jokes about him, he's a running back, obviously, are out there. But Lamar is just unbelievable. And I don't care about the 1 or 2 games a year where he looks really stoppable and he looks really bad. Give me the other 15 and give me the fact that he wins at like a 70+% clip so far in his career. He's one of the most winningest quarterbacks like to start out a career in regular season history. So I am happy that people are respecting Lamar right now. I'm not even certain that that'll last the regular season, though. If they lose a game here or there, I think people will jump on the narrative as soon as possible. I think Lamar's one of those guys that people just can't wait to hate on for whatever reason.
Yeah. All right, let's roll on to Green Bay at Kansas City. Kansas City wins 13-7. Kansas City fans could look at this game and say maybe their defense is fixed, or maybe Jordan Love is just that bad. We're going to find out. They've got the Raiders and Dallas up next, although both teams they didn't just look beatable. They were beaten this last week. But we'll find out about the Kansas City defense. The offense still didn't look good. For Green Bay, if Aaron Rodgers is cleared to play, the earliest he can return to the team is on Saturday. So not that he needs practice at this point in his career, but it could be a letdown spot for Green Bay again next week, either starting Jordan Love for a second time or starting Aaron Rodgers off of a 2-week inactive list.
Yeah, and they'll be going against Russell Wilson, who looks like he's coming back for Seattle. So it could be the return of Aaron Rodgers from talking about woke mobs and cancel cultures on a podcast to play football against Russell Wilson, who's returning from hosting imaginary huddles pregame on the field.
Running 2-minute drills by himself.
Yeah, what an insane person Russell Wilson is. But that Kansas City, I would say that everyone wants there to be like, oh, what's going on with Patrick Mahomes? What's going on with Kansas City? And I think people want it to be one issue. People want it to be like, oh, this is the problem and this is how you fix it and that's the solution or whatever. I think it's probably a mix of a lot of issues. And I think one of those issues is, one, I would say Travis Kelce doesn't look like the same player to me. And I think it shows how important he was and how important of a player he was to that offense and the space he was able to find, whether it be like it gave you a really tough decision to make as a defensive coordinator in terms of putting a safety on him or putting a quarter on him in some capacity, and putting a linebacker on him is pretty much impossible. So they had to make a tough decision. You don't really have to make that tough of a decision if he can't get open anymore. Number two, I think that, I think Mahomes' plant foot, which he did hurt last season, I think that there's something there. I saw Dan Orlovsky and someone else breaking down some of the throws, and it seems like there is something bothering him with that back plant foot. So I think that there might be something there. I think that O-line, number 3, is a problem. They obviously went out and spent a ton of money, but it doesn't seem to be much better than what he was dealing with last year. And then I think number 4, it just seems like Andy Reid's not adjusting whatsoever. And it seems like their only adjustment this week was to go super dink and dunk. And maybe that was just an overcorrection kind of to some of the kind of criticism going in the week of. But people want to say like, oh, this Chiefs team has been bad all year, and this Chiefs offense has been bad all year, but that's just not the case. Like you look at Patrick Mahomes' first 5-6 games, and then you compare them to these last couple, they don't even look like the same players statistically.
Yeah, we could do a whole podcast breaking down the Chiefs and what's going on with Mahomes. Maybe we'll have a dead week where we just decide we want to do that. But there's certainly a lot of stuff you could dig into there. But let's go ahead and move along here. The Arizona Cardinals at the San Francisco 49ers. Arizona wins this game 31-17, minus Kyler Murray, minus DeAndre Hopkins, AJ Green, Chase Edmonds, JJ Watt, and they dominated the 49ers. So I want to talk about Kyle Shanahan. We're talking about NFL coaching frauds. The 49ers are 3-5 this season. In his career as a head coach, Shanahan is 31-39. If you remove the 2019 season, he is 18-36, and he's had a losing record every year of his career. Now, don't get me wrong. As an X's and O's guy, there may not be somebody smarter in the league. He is probably the best offensive coordinator in the NFL, and he probably needs to be an offensive coordinator again. I do not think he's a head coach.
Wow.
This is the catchphrase that the Eagles put out there for so long, but this guy has no emotional intelligence, no ability to develop talent outside of making mediocre quarterbacks look good. Look at their recent draft pick. You got third-round pick Trey Sermon. They traded 2 fourth-rounders for this guy. He's inactive. They sent a boatload to go get Trey Lance. He's not a starter. Why? You can watch that game and tell Jimmy Garoppolo is not a good quarterback. Why are you not playing this guy you mortgaged your future for? They have a rookie 5th-round pick at cornerback who played well at the beginning of the year, gave up a bad completion during the Eagles game, and they benched him. He's on the bench so Josh Norman, who is awful, can get a taunting penalty while down 14 to Colt McCoy. And then go look at Brandon Ayuk, right? Ayuk had a great rookie year. Strangely, he did something and got in the doghouse for the first half of the season. Now he's back on the field, and all of a sudden, look, Brandon Ayuk's a good football player again. Like, it seems like it takes just this much for a good young player to get in the doghouse with Kyle Shanahan. I don't know if he's got too much power in the building. Like he needs the Howie Roseman that's going to tell him who's going to play, because the way he's handling developing these young guys, it's just baffling to me. I think he's great at scheming things up. I think he is a good Sunday coach. I think he is an awful Monday to Saturday coach.
Yeah, I'll take the Sunday coach any day of the week. I'll take Kyle Shanahan in Philadelphia as the head coach any day of the week. But I will say that there's a lot there that's reasonable. I've talked at length on this podcast about how frustrated I am with the whole narrative of, anyone in a Shanahan offense can run the ball for 1,000 yards. And I was pissed off earlier on in the year that they weren't giving Trey Sermon that opportunity, and they still should be. And Brandon Ayuk, he was the guy. Everyone, loves to complain that we didn't draft Justin Jefferson. I wanted Ayuk more than I wanted Jefferson. So I, more than anyone, think Brandon Ayuk's a stud, and I think it was nonsense that he wasn't playing. And I think I completely agree with you that it seems like it's way too easy to get in Kyle Shanahan's doghouse, and maybe that's a trait he inherited from his dad. I don't know. Maybe that's kind of just an old school football guy in him. Like, he kind of does have more of a tie to that old school lineage than a guy that, like, we'll talk about, like Sean McVay, that he gets compared to, or some of these other guys have. So maybe that's part of the problem. But I will just say, I think saying he's not a head coach is borderline crazy. The guy made a Super Bowl. I know he's been rough in his other years there. I think making a Super Bowl should buy you a couple of years, let alone winning a Super Bowl, which I've talked about with Doug Peterson. I think it's incredibly.
Say, go tell that to Doug Peterson.
I know, I think we should have kept them, but I think it's incredibly difficult to make the Super Bowl and obviously to win the Super Bowl is even harder. Kyle Shanahan can tell you that more than anyone, but I would say it's even doubly more difficult to make the Super Bowl when your quarterback is Jimmy Garoppolo, and when you don't have that franchise quarterback. I think Kyle Shanahan making the Super Bowl with that roster, with Jimmy Garoppolo, only throwing 8 times in the NFC Championship game. I think it's one of the more. I think it's one of the more impressive coaching feats of all time. That 2019 season. I think that there's plenty of criticism to go around about these last couple of years. There's been excuses every year. And I think next year is really the kind of make or break year a little bit for Shanahan. And when I say make or break, I think that means he could get fired from San Fran. I think he'd get gobbled up for a head coaching job right away, whether that be a top level college job or, another NFL head coaching job. But I think next year with Trey Lance, maybe after a full off season to really mold Trey Lance, I think that's when I'll kind of judge Kyle Shanahan a little closer than I am this season. But there's definitely a lot to complain about. That's perfectly verifiable.
Yeah, and I mean, he's going to be a head coach. And, I mean, to be clear, a lot of teams have a head coach that's not as good as Kyle Shanahan. But for the reputation that he gets.
That's fair. That's totally fair.
Which is more where I'm going from. I think he'd be one of the best offensive coordinators out there. I think he can be a good head coach. I think he needs to be in a situation where he doesn't hold all the cards. He needs a general manager to tell him, no, you're not going to bench our wide receiver that was amazing as a rookie because you don't like he shuffles his feet before he takes off the line. Or, whatever it is, whatever it was, he needs somebody that can step in there.
It's a little Josh McDaniels-ish.
Yeah. Okay, rolling along. Tennessee. Oh, one more thing. Just play Trey Lance. You traded a crap ton for him. You're 3-5. Your season's over. Put him in and see what he's got. Same thing for Trey Sermon. Same thing for DeMondre Lenore. All these guys, get them on the field. Your season's over. Like, you're in a loaded division. You can't win it. You just lost to the team that's going to win your division's backup quarterback. Just get Trey Lance in there.
I agree completely.
Okay, Tennessee Titans at the Los Angeles Rams. Tennessee wins this game 28-16. Don't look now, but the Titans have beaten the Bills, the Chiefs, the Colts, and the Rams back to back. The Titans defense has forced 11 turnovers in the last 6 games. They've had 13 sacks in the last 6 games. Now, the offense struggled in this game without Derrick Henry. The question is, can the D keep playing at this dominant of a level? Because if so, they can string this thing along and hope they get him back.
And I think that this defense's performance and everything that's going on with the Titans is just part of the Mike Vrabel Coach of the Year campaign. I think the job Vrabel's doing in Tennessee is unbelievable, especially now that Derrick Henry's hurt, if this continues. And like you said there, they've beaten legitimate teams on this stretch of wins. So it's been incredibly impressive, and it's something that I kind of talked about in the offseason with the Titans, and something that I felt in the offseason. I looked at the Titans as a potential Super Bowl candidate in the offseason because of that addition of Julio Jones, which hasn't been that good. But when you invest so much in Ryan Tannehill, Derrick Henry, Julio Jones, and A.J. Brown as those pillars of your offense, that should be kind of you admitting as an organization that, okay, we think Vrabel can coach up the defense with limited resources to a degree where we have a good defense and we have a good offense because we paid for this top tier talent. So you have to hope that kind of Julio Jones steps up into his role as the year goes on, especially without Derrick Henry offensively. And you have to hope that maybe Derrick Henry can come back in the playoffs or at the end of the season, or I haven't seen an update on that as of late. And you also have to hope that A.J. Brown just continues being an absolute beast. I mean, that guy is just an absolute freak of nature. And, it's just an incredible job that Vrabel's doing, because you have to imagine that Vrabel has kind of been handed that situation and said, like, hey, make this average, like make this defense average with what you're seeing on paper and what you're seeing, contract wise. And he's putting it to a degree where that's a good defense. That's a legitimately good defense.
Yeah. I think Matthew Stafford in this game might have cost himself the MVP, which I think is a bogus award that's driven by narratives and how you do it in primetime games. But on Sunday Night Football with everybody watching, he was 9 of 16 for 62 yards with 2 interceptions at halftime. Like, he killed his team in this game, and it wasn't all his fault. but I think he likely cost himself the front runner MVP status in this one. And
Yes,
so I
probably.
want to call out my last GOAT coach here, or not GOAT, my fraud. And that one's Sean McVay. Sort of. Sean McVay, there's no doubting what he's able to do offensively, but man, he is an absolute coward. For the guy who like had the spot on TV a few years ago where they were like, hey, your second year coach, 2015, third quarter, this was the situation.
Mm-hmm.
What play did you call? And the guy can supposedly recall all that, but he can't look at an analytics chart. Like, come on. He kicked a field goal on 4th and goal from the 4-yard line down 21-3. He kicked a field goal on a 4th and 12 from the Tennessee 36 with 14 minutes left, down 21-6. Like, you don't have time at that point to be kicking field. He's an absolute coward. He's a great coach, total coward. And if you're a coward, you belong in my fraud list. Sort of.
Yeah,
He's halfway there. He's got one leg on my fraud list. 2.5 frauds.
I agree with you. He's a great coach, but he definitely is way, way, way too conservative. And yeah, I think, the defense of McVay is the same as the defense for Shanahan, kind of. He made the Super Bowl with Jared Goff, which I know you, of all people, as not a big Jared Goff guy, can appreciate that. But
the guy literally threw away a 4th down pass 2 weeks in a row.
He's just the absolute worst, and McVay will let you know. But I think McVay breaks through this year if he can start being aggressive enough. And by the way, Shanahan, who I defend and who I like a lot, is the same way. He's not aggressive. He takes field goals in weird situations. He doesn't like to go for it. He'll punt in a weird situation. Shanahan and McVay are very similar in that way.
Which is baffling to me, especially with McVay. He's on the cutting edge with motion and pre-snap motion and shifts and all this stuff. And then when it comes to the analytics on that, he's just not having it. It's bizarre.
I agree.
Okay, let's kick it over to the Monday night game. Chicago at Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh comes out with a 29-27 win. Chicago overcomes a 2-score deficit in the fourth quarter, only lose to a field goal with 26 seconds left. Somebody let Mike Tomlin know that's what Chris Boswell is paid to do, not get laid out on the sideline on trick plays. But Fields settled in. He started the game rough. Second half, he was 12 of 18 for 228 yards and a touchdown. I think you saw, and against a really good defense. And so I was encouraged by what I saw from Justin Fields. I was not encouraged. I've got a buddy, one of my best friends is a big Steelers fan, asked me what I thought. The Steelers are going to have to run the ball and play defense. And I just don't know that that's a winning formula, because when you get a game where your defense just can't stop whoever, Ben Roethlisberger is just not going to be able to put the team on his back like Lamar can. He just can't push the ball downfield anymore. And it's kind of pathetic to watch, to be honest.
I mean, are the Steelers going to have to play defense if they get 13 penalties for 115 yards on the other team, and they get 5 penalties for 30 yards for their team? I don't know. And I hate to be this guy. I hate to be the refs guy. And I actually thought the refs didn't have a bad Sunday. I thought Sunday, I didn't really see anything that I was like, oh, this is egregious in any game. But that was the worst game of the season, officiating wise. And it's not just everyone loves to look at the Tony Correnti nudging his butt out into a guy and then throwing the flag and holding it there like a walk-off Michael Jordan three-pointer. Everyone loves that video because it's a fun video. But what they should be focusing on is the 3 times on one drive that Justin Fields got smoked in the helmet with someone else's helmet crowned down, leading into them with no call, no protection for a future young star in this league, potentially in Justin Fields, in a breakout game on primetime. By the way, Justin Fields had the best drive of his young career, leading them down for a touchdown to take a lead in that game. And it's just a shame that game, and whatever people want to say to me that I'm sour grapes. I had Bears money line. I made money on the game. I had Bears +7 as well. But the fact that this game was flat out decided by refs is appalling to me. It was a great game. It had the opportunity to be a classic. And you get those missed calls on Fields followed up by the next possession that the Steelers drive. The second play of the drive, Ben Roethlisberger gets hit a millisecond late and they give him a late hit call and a roughing the passer call after 3 missed Justin Fields calls on one possession, like literally 5 minutes before. Just absolutely damning to me. And then that taunting call is a complete joke. I'm not, whatever. Even focusing before the fact that the ref bumped into him on purpose, it looks like. Besides that, the taunt, he got the biggest play of his young career, getting a sack on 3rd down to give his offense the chance to get the ball with 3 points down in a game that they had come back and they had fought back in. And he took 2 steps towards the sideline, and it just so happened that the punter was in his vicinity, and he gets a taunting flag that completely changes the game. If the Steelers have to punt the ball in that situation and the Bears do what they did offensively, and I don't think that there's any reason to believe that they wouldn't have been able to have the same type of success with that big play to Allen Robinson followed up by a touchdown, they'd be up 4. The Bears would have been up 4 in that game, which would have forced the Steelers to have to score a touchdown, which we know with Ben Roethlisberger would have been difficult with on a limited time with no timeouts and whatever the situation was. But instead, they were only down 1. So the Steelers were able to kick a field goal and win the game when they got the ball back after Justin Fields and the Bears scored too quick. I will say Matt Nagy probably, once they were on the 15 with like a minute and 50 seconds left, Matt Nagy and the Bears probably should have ran some clock down. But to be fair, I honestly didn't even think of it in the situation until they scored. I was like, ooh, they probably scored too fast, but that should be something they probably should have thought about. But I was disgusted by the officiating in this game, and I thought it was the most one-sided officiating of the season.
Yeah, the taunting thing was ridiculous. The Justin Fields getting smoked and the Ben Roethlisberger flag, that's something the league has always had an issue with. If you're a running quarterback, you are not afforded the same protections that non-running quarterbacks are. You saw it infamously for an entire season with Cam Newton. Guys were headhunting Cam Newton that season after they went to the Super Bowl. And Cam Newton was arrogant. People were tired of it. People were headhunting, and he didn't get any calls. It's something the NFL's got to clean up. They've got to treat all these quarterbacks the same.
Yeah, and the shame of it is 2 of those calls, one of them was on a run. 2 of them were in the pocket for Justin Fields, and that's the worst part. So whatever you want to say, not you, but in general, like the officials, if they want to say we can't protect running quarterbacks, that's one thing. But when he's in the pocket, he's not a running quarterback just because he's black. And not to make it a race thing, but he's not a running quarterback when he's standing in the pocket doing a 3-step drop just because of, the type of player he is or the color of his skin. And I hate to do that, but it does really just feel like white statue pocket passers get every single call. And if you're Cam Newton, if you're Lamar Jackson, if you're Justin Fields, if you're any of these guys, even Kyler Murray's actually had some rough ones where he hasn't gotten calls. If you're any of these guys who make a name as a fast quarterback, even if you're in the pocket, you don't get those same protections afforded to you. It's nonsense.
Yeah, I agree. All right, well, that's going to about wrap it up. Our longest episode to date of Chalk Talk. Had a lot of good stuff to get into here. It's a good discussion, but Mark, anything you didn't get into this episode? What do you got a final thought for us tonight?
Yeah, I guess I pulled it up because I was slow on the draw to getting it up earlier. I'll make my final thought just kind of touching on the Patrick Mahomes point I wanted to make earlier about how maybe let's calm down about freaking out that he's been bad all season. Let me zoom in a little bit better to make that a little more clear. There we go. So obviously you take a look at these last couple games and they've been rough. And you can see that when you're looking at the average is 5.9, 5.7, 4.5. Those last 3 games under 300 yards, none of them with multiple passing touchdowns. That's a rough stretch. But you look at the games before that and also passer rating, 74.8, 74.6, 62.3. That's rough. But 3 of the first 4 games of this season, I'm going, ESPN's page is crazy. They were over 131 on passer rating. I mean, he played 3 fantastic games. He played 2 games over 88 on QBR. In those games, he had 3 touchdowns, 5 touchdowns. And he did have some troubles with interceptions, but he's had 4 games this year with over 300 yards. So I just want to say, like, everyone freaking out about Patrick Mahomes right now after these last couple games, that's kind of just generalizing the whole season as a lost season for Patrick Mahomes. he had an incredible game the first couple weeks of the season. And also, if Clyde Edwards-Helaire doesn't fumble the ball against the Baltimore Ravens, the Kansas City Chiefs are 6-3. And obviously, you could play that game with a lot of teams in the league, and you could actually play that game with a couple of the other Chiefs losses as well. But that one specifically, they were literally running the ball with Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the same way that the Chargers were kind of running the ball to set up a field goal with Austin Eckler against the Eagles. It was basically the same situation, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire coughs up the fumble, and they don't get a chance to kick the game-winning field goal. So it's a game of bounces, but the good thing for Patrick Mahomes, and I mentioned this on the pod, the preview, the good thing for him is that they're getting a chance to play these bad teams while they're figuring themselves out. They got to play the Giants 2 weeks ago. They got to play Jordan Love last week. And coming up, they get to play the Raiders. It looks like the time you want to play the Raiders too. So I think they'll be able to figure it out down the stretch. I keep saying that they'll turn it around, but I really do think they will.
Yeah. Well, my final thought has nothing to do with football, but about 5 years too late to the party here, my wife and I started watching Stranger Things and got sucked in. So I don't know how I missed this show in like 2017 when it came out, but we've already binged like 2 seasons. Phenomenal show. So if somehow this podcast gets finds some portal in time and goes back to 2017 and somebody's listening to this that somehow hasn't seen the show, you need to go check it out. You'll thank me later. Top-notch show. Just don't watch it. Don't start it until you've got 8 hours to just watch the whole thing because it's that good.
I'm so boring during sports season because I just end up rewatching the same types of shows that I've watched a million times, like Seinfeld and How I Met Your Mother and stuff like that. But it's kind of just background noise while I'm usually doing research and stuff. But man, especially I mentioned college basketball at the top. Too much sports going on right now. I wish I could watch some new shows, but that'll probably have to wait till January for me.
Understandable. Then you're into draft season too.
You're right. The grind never stops. The grind.
All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us for episode 23 of Chalk Talk, our longest episode to date. Hope you enjoyed it all. If you did, and we know that you do, be sure you smash that subscribe button so you don't miss the next episode. Drop us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It would really help us out. You can follow us both on Twitter. Our handles are right here. I'm at _TPL. He's at Mark Henry Jr. _. So for me, from Mark, from the Painted Lines, we'll see you guys next time.